Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis Gianoutsos. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Kristi, a big welcome to you.
Dennis, thank you so much for having me. This is such an important topic, and I agree with everything you said. It's changing, and change is constant, and the description you gave about running email to email, meeting to meeting sounds really familiar. So I think this is really important, and I'm so excited to be here.
Great, thank you. And yeah, you're right. I mean, people are going from email to email, marketing, and meeting to meeting, and I don't know about you, but some of these people I'm working with, some of these coaches, it's quite interesting to see what happens. They get to some meetings and they're checking their phones, not to see what email they've got, but what meeting is this? Because they have no idea. And then they're tending to do that a lot. So, Kristi, I've given the introduction to our listeners in relation to you a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, you bet. So like you mentioned, I've been at eBay. Funny enough, I think I need to update my profile. I've now actually been there almost 20 years, if you can believe that. So I'm about to hit my 20-year anniversary in March. And so really, I've been there 20 years, but I've been under multiple CEOs, I've been through extreme growth, some turnarounds. I've really been at one company, but it feels like I've been at 5 or 6. And prior to that, I did my undergrad at the University of Wyoming and grew up in Wyoming. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. And I think we being Hewlett-Packard took one of your CEOs actually. So we had Meg Whitman come and become our CEO.
That's right. I was under Meg Whitman. I think she was the CEO when I first joined. So I was obviously under her the whole time. So we shared CEOs. We'll have to see if we shared some leadership experience there. Absolutely.
Awesome. So 20 years in the organization, and you've done, as you said, various roles, which is really important because a lot of us have been in these large organizations. Today, we see a lot of people in leadership roles go from one company to another company, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years. And being in one company for 20 years, 30 years is a bit rare nowadays. How have you found being in an organization that long and then going from different role to different role? What's it been like for you?
Yeah, I'm so glad you say that. Honestly, sometimes I have a little bit of, anxiety about having been there so long. And I question myself, like, should I still be here? Like, this isn't the norm. This isn't what people do. Am I going to impact myself down the line? But ultimately, the reason I continued to stay so long is because, as you've talked about, like, leadership is changing, business is changing. So even though it's been one company, I've never stopped learning. I'm still so passionate about our mission. And I love the people I work with that every time I question myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, almost 20 years. That's way too long. I cannot still be here. And then I go through and I ask myself, am I being challenged? Do I have opportunity to learn? Do I believe in what we're doing here? Do I love my team? And I always check all those boxes. So I've just continued to stay. But yeah, there have been times where it's been really hard and times where it's been really exciting. And you can imagine it's been all the emotions and all the things.
It's like you get everything that you want in life and in leadership roles all in one place, right? It's a one-stop shop. And yeah, I get it because I spent many years within EDS/Hewlett-Packard, and you had so many things to work on. It was like a new organization every time. And there was mergers and acquisitions, and then there was changes of CEOs and leaders, and you were going through constant change while also being in the same foundation. But there was that one thing, and I think you hit it on the head. And either way I look at it, it's the DNA of the organization. It's the people you work with. I seriously miss the people that I used to work with in the organizations, and it's friendships, it's people, and we still hang around together and things like that. I think it's something that's really important for us to have as a community of people nowadays, in particular, when we are working at home alone so much.
Oh, I could not agree more, Dennis. In fact, really joining eBay really after undergrad, like some of my best friends I met there. Just being in your early 20s, like that's where you meet your work friends and they become your sort of leadership circle, if you will, where they just stay with you. So some of them are still there and many of them have moved on. Many of them have left and come back. I totally agree. And it's really interesting to think about the return to office and what that means. I think a lot of people are talking about, like, oh man, why did I ever go into the office? I can sit at home in my sweatpants and drink my coffee without my commute. But to your point, I think there is a future where that human face-to-face connection still does add so much value and is important for leadership and for organizations. So it'll be interesting to keep watching how all these companies adjust and decide to, I think most are saying we're going to be doing the hybrid experience. So it'll be interesting to see how that all turns out. But I completely agree that human connection is so important, especially when you're leading teams and when you want to connect with your leadership.
Yeah, yeah. Now, talking about leadership there, you just mentioned, how did you get into leadership?
Yeah, great question. As I was thinking about coming to chat with you, I was like, how did I get into leadership? And oddly enough, I'm going to bring it back to like high school. Ultimately, we are a big sports family. And so I'm a big sports person. I played softball, soccer, and tennis growing up. And like looking back, that's really where I started my leadership journey. Whenever I was on a team, I often find myself stepping up and setting the tone and the culture. And I think that's where I really realized, oh, I love people and I love leading them and I love creating a good experience. And so that ultimately took me into college and then into eBay. In college, I even led some teams, like really funny jobs. Like I managed a movie theater. And so I had to manage employees of the movie theater. And so that was a tricky one because I'm mostly managing people my age in a similar experience. I actually think, as silly as it is, I learned so much from it. And then coming into eBay, same thing. Like it was intended to be a temporary job. It was shortly after September 11th, having mentioned I've been here almost 20 years and the economy was weird. What I thought I was going to do was not happening anymore. And so I thought I got a temporary job at eBay. But as I mentioned, I fell in love with the mission and the people. And then slowly but surely, I noticed that in meetings, I would be speaking up or I would be supporting other people. And then it just naturally became where I was like, oh, I love helping others and supporting them and leading them. And so that's how I fell into it. It was never really a conscious decision, but it's just what felt right.
Interesting how you say you fell into it, right? I think a lot of people do fall into that leadership role. Now, the sports that you said were softball, tennis,
and soccer, football for you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Soccer, yeah, football, yeah, cool. So we shared CEOs and now we share sports, right? I used to play as a kid softball and then tennis, things like that. Hey, this is good.
Oh my gosh, excellent. I love it. Yeah, those are my favorite. Yeah, I was thinking about like in tennis, as a senior, I was first singles, which meant that I was intended to be the best. And it was really interesting because I felt like I culturally led the team, but then I had to fight for that position officially. So that's how I think. And I have two boys and luckily they love sports, so we don't really have to push them. But that's one of the main reasons I do push them into sports, is seeing them grow their leadership skills at such a young age. I think of my 13-year-old, he's been on a baseball team for about a year. And just this last weekend, they went and won a tournament. And I think it's largely because of his own leadership and the way he's changed the culture and the team to really care about one another. It felt like originally they were all sort of individuals working on a team. And over this weekend, I've just watched them become a team and fighting together. And it's been really cool to see, even in my kids.
Yep, I'm pretty much entrepreneurial. I started in the sales field. So I was a sales rep selling industrial products, services. I had a large territory, pretty much all in New Zealand. So what I learned from there is I learned a number of things, that sales are the wealth creators of companies. That's the first thing I learned, especially if you work for an American company. They really look after you because you can bring in the goods and the money. But my background was built on sales. The foundation was built on sales. I developed it. I learned techniques and skills, and I honed in my particular skills in actually creating that wealth and building up relationships. That's what I learned. So a bit about myself. I went into business on a number of times. We created a large company, a big IT training company, probably towards the end of the 80s. And we caught the wave where people going to computers, they need to be trained on it. So we actually caught the wave and created a large wealth. And I learned about leadership. I learned about large numbers of staff and what that incorporates and what that entails. But I'll speak more about that later on, about staff. And I learned the technology at an early age, because right now technology is everywhere. So I've lived in Egypt for 2 years, Middle East, Saudi for a year, Philippines for 2 years, up in China. So I've been around, and I went from sales and I really delved into the international side of business. I speak a number of foreign languages, which is very helpful, but also being Māori, being culture, you can actually accept other cultures, which is important. And being religious, I'm religious. You learn about Islam and about the Catholics in the Philippines. So you've got to be mindful of that if you are to succeed. And that's something where people miss that opportunity. You got to understand the cultures. And I mastered that. So that's about me. Tech companies. I own an IT company. I own a construction company, which we're doing very well at the moment because of what's happening out there. So we bring finance in. And right now we're financing projects that have on bunk. So we've caught that wave. And also a decentralized system from America. We're putting that in a number of countries right now. So decentralization is another sort of change. So you've got to catch that wave and you've got to understand the opportunity. And sales taught me that. So that's about me.
Awesome.
I'm open, friendly. Don't smoke.
Yeah. Hey, tell me, when you said decentralization, it's a thing at the moment, what do you mean by that?
Decentralization is protecting your own privacy and it's protecting your own assets. A centralized system is where everything is open. And so anyone can see it. A decentralized is mainly come the lines of blockchain technology. So for example, in America, I heard there was 9.5 million people that couldn't get married last year because of COVID. So they come up with a decentralized system. So it can be done, and it can be verified and you own it. And cryptocurrency is based on that. A number of cryptocurrencies are based on a decentralized system.
Yeah.
The attraction to that is it gets rid of a lot of jobs, accountants, lawyers. You actually don't need them. Yeah, that's their nemesis, this decentralized system.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
So it's kind of been,
Yeah. And whereabouts did you grow up in New Zealand?
Oh, sorry. I grew up in Porirua, Wellington.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Porirua.
Porirua. No. I lived in Christchurch for 13 years. Hamilton for a number of years, Auckland. Went back to Porirua. My mother still lives down there. I go down there and see her. But, I like Auckland. I actually love Auckland. I grew to love it. Christchurch, I love. South Island, loved it. And where I grew up has an impact on your character when you're brought up with, because Porirua we're a close-knit bunch and great place to be brought up. Did the outdoors thing. They didn't have internet then, so you go and play outside. Yeah.
So listeners, you're listening to two Wellingtonians here. We both were born in Wellington, and so Rich is in Porirua and I was in Miriva and the eastern suburbs.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's where I grew up as well. And we're both now living in Auckland and both loving the city, which is really cool. So Richard, thanks for sharing the background. That's awesome to hear. Hey, a little bit about how did you get into leadership? So you shared a little bit about the sales side of things and getting involved and living in different countries, but how did you get into leadership?
Leadership, how I got into it is actually when you start owning your own companies. When I was going through the sales field, you got management, you got leadership. Leadership was more about relationship building, and they could see your leadership in terms of you representing your company, the products or services you got on offer. And it's about the techniques and styles on how you use to make a sale. So I started to use that. And then when we went into business, we grew a company up to about 500 staff. And that was big. So leadership then got more important. So how do you motivate? How do you be in tune with your staff when there's so many? So mainly you got to rely, you can't be everywhere at once. So you got to have managers that manage people, and then the managers have got to be trained, and you got to get the reports, and you got to make sure, are the reports accurate? Are they viable? Do they make sense? Can you make sense out of all this data? So leadership is about, to me, what brought me into it is actually be more effective, more efficient in your deliveries of what you got to do. Measuring your outcomes was important, but also in business, obviously, money is everything, and also creating that cash flow. So leadership is about making people account. If you pay the manager a good salary, then obviously their responsibilities are important to you because you want accurate information. You want to see the proof that the work has been done. And the result is that your customers are happy, their staff is happy, which are your staff, and you're making money. And any problems that arise, because nothing goes according to plan, that the leadership style that you've incorporated allows that to actually solve those issues or problems that come around.
Yeah, it's interesting how a lot of things in life, people, even when watching people do projects and things like that, and they think there's a budget, but it's never going to be the right budget because it never works out to be that way. And it's quite interesting how you've got to be able to adjust and adapt with that. And yeah, it's really interesting to see. And so 500 staff, that's awesome. And to see, and then having that right leadership team around you, which would have been important, and making sure people are there to account. Now, when we say account, we don't mean counting numbers only, Tim. We're talking about being accountable. right? And that's probably a big thing we're needing to see. Do you think we see enough leaders today being accountable and taking ownership, Richard?
That's a good one. I've been do a lot of contract work, mainly in economic development, business development. And what I see is boards of these organizations, they hire the wrong person for the job. And straight away, you're off to a bad start. And I don't know what's gone wrong, the processing or whatever. I always put it down to they really don't know the type of person they want to lead this organization.
Right.
Or it's not clear what the objectives that they want to achieve. And so if you've got the wrong leader in there, and it could be a narcissist, it could be someone that has its own agenda, there's major problems. And it's like a project manager. If you start it wrong, it's going to start going wrong all the way through. And it's just going to get worse. So that's what I've seen. And I think leaders, the leader quality is, to me, is people. A people's person. They understand it. They get it. They can see through crap. They can smell it and they can see it, but they also have solutions to that. A leader, in my ways, is someone that is not afraid to get their hands dirty. He speaks from experience. He or she speaks from experience. They know the real deal, and they can actually motivate people to actually make them feel highly motivated to get their job done. It's not about belittling them or blaming them or anything like that, because that just creates confusion too. So someone that's not a very good leader, and it shows, where you get quality staff go, innovation, and all that stuff is suppressed. And then all you've got is just a soup of mess.
Leaders' quality is a people person or people?
People, someone that's a people's person, that can understand people, that's interactive, is approachable, but also is very clear on what needs to be done.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.